it's Sue, and today I am starting a new series where I draw a character with every letter of the alphabet. Today is A, so let's get right into it. I chose Ashoka for the letter A because I used to love her when I watched the Clone Wars show with my older sister. Haven't watched the show in a while, and I don't think we ever finished it. But when it came to characters that I really liked, who started with A, she was one of the top ones on my list. I was gonna draw Arrietty from The Secret World of Arrietty, which is the only anime I've ever watched, but I haven't seen that movie in so long that I didn't feel that attached to that character. I just didn't want to draw like Ant-Man or someone, even though he is a really cool character, since a lot of my favorite characters are Marvel. So I chose her. I'm pretty sure she's the only Star Wars character that I've picked. And right now you're watching me do my first sketch of her. I chose to draw her from one of the later seasons, so she's still kind of young, but she's getting older, so she's got one of the more modest outfits. And her little horn thingies or ear thingies on her head are bigger. Here I flipped the canvas to the side so I could adjust the balance of the eyes and stuff. Right now her face doesn't look that good. Thankfully I do fix it with the second sketch and the line art. This little thing on her head kept giving me trouble because it kept being like higher on one side, and I could tell I just couldn't seem to get it to go so it was like symmetrical. But I couldn't use the symmetrical roller because her head wasn't quite in front view. It was like almost there, but not quite. So I just never ended up being able to use it. Or maybe I was just being lazy. I can't remember completely at this point, but I had a reason. I know that, even if it was me just being lazy. Here I drew in her markings, so I end up changing them when I color them in, because those aren't exactly what her markings look like, and I see that when I look at a 2D drawing of her. I just couldn't seem to tell with the 3D model for some strange reason. I end up moving her hand over later too, because right now it's not attached to her wrist if you look at it. And yeah, so with this point I was pretty much done with the second sketch. I just added in like the stripes on her little head thingies and moved anything around just to make sure I had everything where I wanted it. And I also added in some lines to show where the middle of her ears were, because that would mark where I would shade later. Then I moved on to line art, which was me pretty much just going over exactly what I just did, so it's not that exciting. It went really smoothly, though somehow it managed to take me 14 minutes, even though I never put that much time into my line art. I thought it would only take me like 10 minutes, but like I guess 4 minutes over isn't that much, but still 14 minutes is not what I expected for some line art. I also drew in the lightsabers with line art, though I end up covering that up later with the coloring. So here now the base colors have been filled in, and I'm adding some basic shading. For the white, I shaded it with a black, and then just wherever I saw it shaded on the reference I was looking at, because the 3D model had the shading. So that was really helpful for like defining the planes of the face. It seemed they had two light sources. One was red, and then the other one was coming from the lightsabers. So the shading tended to be like right in the middle of her ear thingies. Like it wasn't quite touching either side. So I had to stick to that when I was doing it, which is different from what I usually do. I then took a red and went in and shaded the face, though I do tone this down later, because it's a little bit too bright for like the rest of the cool colors on her color scheme. It was a pretty straightforward process. I just shaded, tried to define the planes of the face, which I've never been completely good at, but the 3D model reference definitely helped me figure out where to place everything. So I'm going to have to do more studies from that so I can figure out how everything is shaped. Though I guess I do have a face, so maybe I could just figure it out that way. I do think I made her nose a lot less structured than it is in the show, because her nose looks like it's pretty straight, and it's got a pretty sturdy looking nose bridge, but I made hers a lot softer. So that's definitely not actually what she looks like. But I wasn't exactly going for likeness, because I was just going off the 3D model, so I think it's fine. I did move the highlights from where they were in my reference, because they were going from, like, the highlight was on our right, even though the light source was on our left and coming from below. So I just moved the highlights so they were in a more, where they're supposed to be spot. I don't know why the highlight was there, but it was. I went in and shaded the blue parts of her outfit, headdress thingy. That's part of her head. What do you call that? I need to figure it out. I've never been a big fan of Star Wars, except for when we watched the Clone Wars. I never even watched all the movies because they just never interested me enough. So I don't think I'd remember even if I did figure it out. So I'm not really going to put the effort into it. I added some more shading to her skin because I completely left out her neck and arm when I was doing the shading. And I later erase under the arm where I filled in black, because sometimes I'll add shadows with complete black, but since the background ended up being black, I end up having to fix it later because it looks like she's missing part of her torso. I added in some pretty strong highlights coming from the lightsaber, and I filled in the middle of the lightsabers with white. I was trying to make the lighting pretty strong, so I added a really bright light source coming from where the lightsabers are too, which I saw in the reference, and I actually really like the way that looks. I then went in and shaded the hand, which was pretty straightforward. I just added some quick shading, and I used the blur tool to kind of smudge around. So depending on what I'm doing, I either use the smudge or the blur tool. I tried to use the smudge, but it wasn't quite looking right, so I ended up just using the blur tool. I'm used to doing mostly cell shading, so adding in more soft shading is definitely harder for me to comprehend. But I think I did a pretty good job here, or at least a decent job. I went in and shaded the lightsaber, which I tried to make look metal, but I didn't look up any references, so I don't think it looks very much like metal, because I don't know how to shade metal. So maybe that's something I should study. I went in and shaded her torso, or the little bit you can see of it. That's one thing I don't like about the pose I chose. With this version of her, I really liked her outfit, but you cannot see it with this pose. So that's the only downside about it. Like, the pose is really cool, but you can't see her outfit, so it's a little bit of a bummer. I went in and added some shading to her, like, gauntlet wrist things, and then to her lips, and I added a couple highlights too. I then went and waiting for me to do something so I can know what to talk about. Finish shading the gauntlets. Okay. I added some more shading to her hand. I kept forgetting to shade things and then jumping back to them. Like, I'd have all the different coloring sections on different layers, so her skin was on one layer and the white was on one layer, but I kept forgetting to shade the skin, so I kept having to go back and do it. I then added some more strong shadows to the top of her little head piece thingy that she puts on, because that's not part of her head thing. I then merged a copy of all her layers and added a overlay layer on top of that, but I didn't quite like the way that looked, so I changed it to multiply and went in and erased where the strongest highlights would be, so I could make an even stronger lighting situation, because I really like going crazy with rendering and stuff. So I just went in and quickly erased anywhere the light would be hitting super strong, and anywhere shadows weren't. and it was a pretty quick process, though I did have a lot of trouble making the hand look good with this. I went in and erased on the planes of the face and on her little headpiece thingy, which I was kind of sloppy with the erasing, honestly. Thankfully, you can't really tell, but I didn't spend that much time doing it. I just kind of threw it in there and call it good. I also did a lot of blending. Again, this hand gave me a lot of trouble. Never looked quite right, but again, I wasn't putting that much effort into it, so that's probably why. I then went in and added a blue highlight to everything coming from the lightsabers. So it just anywhere the light would be hitting, and then I lowered the opacity to make it more subtle. After all this, I then went in with a more highlights to the eyes, and then added the red that I saw in the reference, which was kind of a last minute thing. So I don't know if it totally fits in, but it doesn't take away from the picture, so I left it in there. And I always have liked the look of when there's like two light sources, and the red does kind of look cool, I think. After this, I figured I was pretty much done, though I did add in a little indication of, I think it's called the Cupid's bow thingy, the thing that dips in above your lip, and then I was pretty much done with the thing. I tried to add all the layers into a folder, but that didn't work. I played around with the composition a little bit more, but I didn't end up changing anything. I did end up coming back later and moving her lips because I thought they were too far to the side and it looked kind of weird. So I ended up painting over her face, which for some reason was doing that. I ended up turning off the shading so I could make it look. And thankfully, because of all the blending, I was just able to blur all the colors together and make it look fine. And then I just moved around the shading and made the lips look like they were actually supposed to go there. It did take quite a bit of trial and error, and the shading doesn't look exactly like how it was originally. Kind of lost that indication of the Cupid bow thingy, but I did end up making the shading look a little less awkward on her right cheek. So I guess that's a win. And then I was done. Here is the finished picture. I had a lot of fun with this first day of the challenge, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Bye!